All sources and content belongs to their respective owners. I'm utilizing the information under fair use. I want to show you a clip from a TikTok video, and this video features women in wedding gowns, but these women are not actually married. They're wearing wedding gowns in a symbolic way. So let me show you the footage, and then I can come back with the rest of the commentary. Going based off context, I cannot say where the church is that these women are at. I cannot say what the name of the service is. But I can just base things off of observation and being a biblical believer myself. I believe these women are practicing what is referred to as the speak life doctrine. That doctrine surmises that if a person wants something, they have to appease it through a form of manifestation. I have my gripes with that doctrine, but that's a longer story as it is. What I can say, however, is to a degree it makes sense what these women are doing. They want to be married. They desire it so much, so they are visualizing themselves as wives, and by putting themselves in these wedding dresses, praying, having faith, speaking life, it helps fuel them so that potentially God's willing, if they are to get married, they can say that God blessed them by doing these works. And I find this very endearing, if not adorable, because it's wholesome. There's no behaviors that are crass and vulgar. It's just people who are in their vulnerable state expressing their deepest desire to be married. And I applaud their honesty. I applaud their ability to do this. I don't think I have anything against their values in the sense of them wanting to be wives, and even the way they go about it, but to a nuanced degree. I believe that these women, if they want to get married, they should be able to go to God and ask Him, hey, can we get married? Can we find a spouse? And I'm glad that there are churches that seem to actually care about singles in this regard, at least when it comes to our demographic, that is. But I believe, and this is where we get into the next portion of the commentary, that if we are going to be a people who desire marriage, if we are going to be a people who put ourselves out there in these ways so that we can say, hey, we want to be married, then we need to do this from a structural level. I believe God is all about structure. In fact, when I read His Word, it talks about infrastructure. And I can also assert that His values, including marriage, because biblically speaking, marriage is a part of infrastructure, a healthy, regulated, and a working order society. So I believe that marriage is significant. I believe it plays a massive role in the betterment of a population. But I'm going to share the ways from my observation that marriage is more structurally aligned in other demographics. And in my perception, areas that we as a collective need to work on if we want to be anywhere near their quality as a people. They have a high level of regulation and morality and value system. And of course, they have greater infrastructure than us. They have a lot of things greater than us. And I think we can learn from the structural differences between us. But if we are going to want to get married and aspire to marriage, we need to pull the reins in many more capacities so that we can make this a movement, so that we can make this a culture, a way of life, so that our people can begin to change the trends of broken homes, change the trends of, if they are to get married, baseless marriages, and all the chaotic tropes that we induce. So I believe there's nothing wrong with desiring marriage, but how are we going to sustain that? Starting with the commentary, let's look at the difference between other demographics and us with regards to their publications, with regards to the wedding industry, and just taking a look at how much revenue we could have had if we had a higher married population. I'm looking at thepearlsource.com, and it has this article entitled Tying the Knot, 2022 Wedding Statistics and Facts, and it was last updated May 8th, 2022. I'm going to share certain stats. I just want to share different information that sticks out for me, information that I believe impresses me and I find incredibly fascinating. So it says 2019 registered a total number of 2,126,126 weddings, which means an average of 5,825 marriage ceremonies took place each day. In the United States, the wedding industry generates over $60 billion each year, and that figure does not include the honeymoon. Alright, so I'm going to share this next section is really incredible. So this, I believe, represents all the areas that comes with a wedding. You have photographer, venue, event planner, reception band, reception DJ, florist, videographer, wedding dress, catering, wedding cake, transportation, favors, rehearsal dinner, engagement ring, invitation, hairstylist, makeup artists. It's interesting that 2019 registered a total number of 2,126,126 weddings, which means an average of 5,825 marriage ceremonies took place each day. What comes to mind with me when I see that particular statistic is time, and that plays a role with regards to the structural changes that we need to make, how we are using our time as a demographic so as to ensure we can increase the marriage rates. What are we using our time for? Because from my interpretation, when I look at this stat, it appears that other demographics are using their time to unite themselves via marriage. They're using their time to structurally align themselves in a cohesive way with all the benefits that marriage creates with regards to intact nuclear families. This is to say they are taking the time to solidify those benefits in their communities. They are taking the time to ensure that their offspring are going to be born at large in intact families. With all the time that goes into these marriage ceremonies and with all the weddings that are happening, and statistically speaking, knowing that non-black demographics get married at way higher rates than us, it's to say that they will put their time in the investment of themselves in their collective. How can we engineer our time so as to ensure that there are higher marriage rates? Because if you're telling me that the bashing of the opposite sex is a good use of time, that's not making people want to get married. If you're telling me that us not using our skills so that we can help inform each other about marriage is a good use of time, that's not going to make people know how to get married, because days are going by, years are going by, and marriages are simply not happening. So how can we shift our sense of time and space so that we can be inclusive in this number? The fact that in the United States, the wedding industry generates over $60 billion every year, it makes me think of how we could otherwise generate wealth for our communities. That there are many industries that we're not even being able to access because we're not making ourselves somehow home to those industries. So when people talk down on marriage in our collective, you know how many people are becoming wealthy, even multi-generationally wealthy because of marriage? You know how many businesses are passed down, whether it's for those who make wedding cakes or people who are decorators. And we're not even able to tap into that because guess what? How many of us even get married, for Pete's sake? So imagine if we did tap into that. Some of that could be our wealth. Just getting married could make some of us wealthy. And then you scroll down. There are people who, they have amazing skills. How many of them could also tap into the wedding industry? For whether it's chefs, whether it's people who could start designing our jewelry, whether it's those who do hair and those who do makeup and those who can do art. In other words, making the invitations. Look at the prices that you see on the screen. Or just the invitation cost is $590. Or what if people decided to cater wedding dresses to our unique interests and customize them, adding a different flair and flavor? You know how many designers could get into the wedding dress industry, the catering industry? So many people could get into the transportation. There's so much. And that is, of course, if we were to have an average of 5,000 plus weddings a day. So many people would become otherwise extremely wealthy in our demographic if that were the case. So many people would become extremely wealthy if we had extremely high marriage rates. You see how that works? The industries that we are missing out on? So that comes to mind when I think of these wedding statistics and the structural changes that we must make. Because when I think of the benefits of marriage, of course, I think psychologically. I think of course, economically to the family. But what we didn't consider is the benefits that weddings we are not somehow tapped into. So being pro-marriage is actually a very lucrative venture. And there's so much we're missing out because we're not. But to have a collective with extremely high marriage rates, we're talking everywhere people live. There would be no shortage of hairstylists because there's no shortage of weddings. There would be no shortage of people who could design wedding dresses. That's an extremely massive market that we're missing out on and not being able to tap into. A lot of the areas, I believe, where we could otherwise benefit our wealth, where we could employ our demographic, there's such a drought because we're not even accessing it at large. Family members play a massive role in inducing marriage in other demographics. I mean, look at the marriage rates that they possess. It shows that they are dedicated to creating intact, highly in-tune communities where everybody is aligned. And that reminds me of, for example, this article by The Diplomat entitled Finding Love in China's Marriage Markets by Lane Vandenberg. According to this article, there are marriage markets which are where older family members visit parks, and in these parks they advertise their child's eligibility as a potential spouse. And they meet with other families and speak with other families to arrange meetings between their children. These parks are located throughout China, and the largest of these marriage markets is in People's Park in Shanghai. And there are many others that exist in many large Chinese cities. The family members will post, and I'm reading as per the article, handwritten signs on the sidewalk, and that will include information about their child and the requirements for interested partners. If families attend the markets with both parents and grandparents, 2 or 3 will stand by the sign, while the others wander through the park searching for matches. Families tend to stake out spots. So it is uncommon to see a family member wandering while holding a sign. It is even more uncommon to see someone advertising themselves. This article shows me that families play a massive role in marketing their loved ones, so as to ensure that their offspring or their grandchildren have access to finding a suitable mate. They feel that it is their duty, as per these people that enter into People's Park or in other marriage markets throughout China, for example, to ensure that their offspring find a mate, and for whatever the litany of reasons that they perceive marriage, because I know that in each culture there may be reasons that are tilted for more pragmatic purposes, and in other cultures reasons that are more traditional or spiritual, etc. But whatever the reasons, they see that there is a need, which is to be married, unmarried, and they are trying to fulfill that need by marketing their loved one so that their loved one doesn't have to be alone. And it's not the person themselves that's marketing themselves, it's their families. So families play a massive role in marketing their offspring, in preparing their offspring for access to marriage. So we need to see it as a collective, that it's not just these singles that need to be matched and that they need to somehow get themselves a spouse, but we need to see it as the role that their loved ones also play in preparing them for marriage. And it should be noted that it's nuclear families helping their unmarried loved ones attain other nuclear families. So I believe that even living that lifestyle is informing us, is marketing us to want to fulfill it. So what role can our families play in marketing us so that we can increase the marriage rates? What role can we play if we were to perceive ourselves as one larger, quote, family that could help each other have access to potential suitable mates? The marketing of ourselves is what plays a role with regards to marriage. And speaking of marketing, think of all the magazines that are for non-black collectives, pro-marriage magazines, even on a subliminal way, home life, whether it's decor. There are so many magazines just for weddings and brides and marriage that other demographics, for example, here in the United States, create so that they can constantly advertise / market marriage to their people. Imagery is powerful in that regard. So when we market ourselves for marriage or each other for marriage, it's the words that we use. It's the ways that we present ourselves, broadcast ourselves to make each other seem desirable for marriage. But we're not doing anything like that. When we advertise each other, it's in the worst capacities. And when these families and other collectives advertise themselves, it's for the best, so that they can actually have access to that greater life. What can we learn from with that in terms of marketing ourselves? Instead of deterring people from marriage, how can we advertise marriage to them? So that's another structural condition that we need to consider, is the marketing of marriage, the marketing of people that we want to see married, and the marketing to a large expanse of people so that they will know that marriage is actually a good thing. From The Insider, entitled, "A Mom with Stage 4 Cancer Put Up a Times Square Billboard Reading, 'Date My Daughter to Help Find Her Perfect Match.'" Just the bullet points, it states that Beth Davis, who is the mother of the daughter she placed on this billboard, has stage 4 cancer, but she is on a quest to help her daughter Molly find true love. After signing up on the Wingman dating app, their story caught the attention of CEO Tina Wilson. To help the search, Wilson and Wingman put Molly's dating profile on a Times Square billboard. Throughout the article, it goes on to say how Beth Davis and the CEO of the Wingman app collaborated. Something that really stuck with me is it states, "And while Beth said she would love to see her daughter married with kids, given time restraints, the ultimate goal is to find someone nice, with family values, who is able to give her daughter a great relationship." This mother advertising her daughter while also battling an illness is incredible. What a story, and such a noble premise. She loves her daughter so much, while facing her own difficulties, that she considers her daughter's best interests. and without being crass, hopefully this is not in poor taste. I believe we can learn from this example in that even with our difficulties plaguing us, we should not insist on being harmful to one another in how we present one another, in how we communicate about one another. Excuse me for using that as an example, but when you take into consideration the complexities of our existence, the issues that we face, what are ways that we can make each other's lives easier rather than more difficult? What are ways that we can advertise each other so that we can have a better access to a better life rather than mistreating one another? That rather than being so consumed within our own difficulties, we learn to empathize with the next generation. We learn to empathize with others in our demographic. And maybe that was not an ideal example to use. But we can certainly learn from how other demographics are constantly being selfless towards one another. Also, take note, the CEO of this app favoring the mother in question and saying, look, I'm going to help you find a suitable mate for your daughter. What are ways that we can create alliances with those in high places? For example, I wonder sometimes about our churches or different organizations that claim to care about our communities. What can they do to enable more access to us to be able to have suitable mates? How can we use our positions of influence, if we are in such positions, to help one another have access to opportunities that we previously have not considered? When will we begin to favor one another and not look down on each other when we are in positions where we could actually help so that we can make a difference in each other's lives? My perception is that other demographics incentivize the notion of marriage, not just through advertising marriage, not just through helping their families to become married, but even through ways that maybe we may not consider because it's so subtle, but certainly move the idea forward that marriage is a good thing and you should get married. And I want to show articles that, in my viewpoint, and I'm sure there are many, many more like this, just simply typing in certain keywords tells me in the search engine that, yes, they are pro-marriage. So there's more than what I can show you. But if you were to simply type in certain keywords, you'd probably get millions of results. And I'm not even exaggerating, just with reference to being pro-marriage. So let's take a look at some of the articles that come to mind and what it tells me about other collectives and their structural realities in incentivizing marriage. This article entitled, Just a Paper, Why Do People Get Married Anyways? It's by Relish. Now, what I find really interesting is the phrase, just a paper, because in our demographic, people will tell you reasons not to get married. In fact, they will say that marriage is just a piece of paper. So I believe that that notion being rarely countered is beautiful to see how it's questioned, but in other demographics. And so when you scroll throughout the article, it goes into the reasoning why a person should get married. And it gives much text and much advice that makes sense. And just summarizing, it states, power of commitment. And I can read just a little bit from each area of this article. So under the power of commitment, it states, getting the law involved with your relationship might make it feel more real and long-term. The next section helps define the relationship. In recent years, formal dating culture seems to have fallen out of popularity in favor of things like talking and hookup culture and dating around. This, coupled with the rising acceptance and prevalence of open relationships and polyamory, can make it really hard to understand exactly where you stand in your relationship. Engagement and marriage offers labels that define the exact terms of your relationship. It talks about legal benefits, longevity, emotional symbolism, makes it harder to walk away. And then it gives a conclusion as to help push the point in being pro-marriage. This is not a small deal in my viewpoint. To put your time writing articles and assessing research or introspection shows that they're using their time to be informative and being uplifting for marriage, because they know someone or some people are going to read this and they want to push people in the direction that says, hey, this is why marriage is actually an ideal thing if you haven't thought about it or if you were thinking against it. It's a way of saying I'm looking out for you, whether they realize the depth of that or not. But when you're in a demographic like mine where these are not even a question, for them what may be considered a bare minimum is actually a really profound norm. Getting Married, an overview by Nolo. And when scrolling down, it talks about what marriage is, and it goes in depth as to legal benefits. Let's look at what those benefits, as written per the article, state. Tax benefits, estate planning benefits, including inheritance rights, government benefits, including receiving Social Security, Medicare, and disability benefits, employment benefits, such as obtaining health insurance through your spouse's employer, decision-making benefits, including the right to make medical decisions if your spouse is incapacitated, financial support, consumer benefits, such as family rates for health, homeowners, auto, and other types of insurance. It goes into the financial responsibilities of marriage. This platform, which is a legal-based platform, shares from a structural level the advantages to get married. 9 reasons why you should get married for yourself and for America. This article from the USA Today, just a side note, if it could get any more pro-marriage, just saying, hey, you should for yourself and then for America, how patriotic. And it goes into the 9 reasons, and these reasons include: it's cheaper. It says single people pay more for living expenses than they would if they were married. The annual poverty threshold for 2 people living together with a child was $19,055 last year. And this article being written in 2019, by the way. But it was $28,633 for 2 parents living apart, according to The Future of Children, a research journal produced by Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs and the Brookings Institution. Married couples can take advantage of buying for 2, or even in bulk, which is usually less expensive. It's better for the economy. On average, married couple families have higher incomes than other types of families, with cohabitating parent households only making 61% of the income of their married counterparts, the Future of Children report noted. As a result, they are able to spend more money to help fuel the economy. Married couples help their neighborhoods. Married women and their children have better health insurance. Children of married couples grow up in a more stable environment. It makes mothers less stressed. Children of married couples get more opportunities. Marriage provides better social networks. The longer couples wait, the less likely they will say, I do. And then it goes on to summarize the 9 reasons why marriage is good for America. So if there is a reason you would want to get married, do it for your nation, I guess. Now, something noted is that they use research to verify, not vilify marriage, but actual data to show the benefits of marriage. I'm suspecting that when those who are anti-marriage rail against it, they're not thinking structurally. They're thinking anecdotally or emotionally, and likewise they can't give you numerous studies and sources regarding the subject. Even just studying the nuclear family alone, there is research to suggest, even from the 1800s, early 1800s, that intact families are beneficial for offspring. So if we know that intact families are beneficial for offspring, how do you get those families? Our collective, which is comprised of many broken homes, they never seem to backtrack and realize, hey, your issue is the broken home, but they're still somehow anti-marriage. How are you least likely to get married and then you're anti the thing you don't get? Wouldn't you be more anti the thing that's giving you the biggest difficulties? Yes, marry for money. Top economist shares the surprising financial benefits of marriage in this article from CNBC, and it is pretty well-rounded. Actually, what I like about it is, and let me scroll down, it says, get married, but always assume you'll get divorced. So even though they know that the likelihood of divorce is a high chance, they still give a structural reason. Let's get into that as to why marriage ultimately should be favored. It states, marriage can also benefit your long-term standard of living, albeit to a highly imperfect and uncertain extent if you're awarded alimony in divorce. An estimated 41% of all first marriages will end in divorce or separation, according to data from Columbia-based law firm. Some 60% of second marriages go south, while 73% of third marriages will start with forever and end with sayonara. Yet we all marry convinced we'll make it. Economists call this phenomenon irrational expectations, when people collectively believe in something they know is collectively false. Thinking about marriage comes at an awful price. Many marriages end in exorbitantly costly divorce war, with children forced to take sides and family ties shredded forever. Maybe it's time to reset our idea of marriage from a lifetime partnership to a temporary arrangement that should be celebrated for lasting as long as it does, not lamented for coming apart. This article further goes into the financial benefits, but it's not giving an idealist vantage point. However, in a roundabout sense, it is still pro-marriage. The irony ensues that even in the cynical format, the highly married demographics, the most likely to married of all, and they are the ones producing this article and commentary and the articles that I've shared, they still are conveniently going to insist on marriage. In fact, if I go on to read the article, it says, my advice, when you kneel down and propose, take two things out of your pocket, a sparkling diamond ring and a leather-bound prenup, which will surely be worth far more than its weight in gold. Ultimately, they're saying, if you're going to get married, here is a reason why. Maybe not for certain emotionalized benefits, but if you're going to get something out of it, get structure, get finances. Isn't it interesting how other demographics, they're pro-marriage, even if it's going to have unlikelihood of lasting, even if there are cons to a marriage dissolving. Just think of the profound sentiment as written in this article where it says, maybe it's time to reset our idea of marriage from a lifetime partnership to a temporary arrangement that should be celebrated for lasting as long as it does, not lamented for coming apart. It's interesting that, that is an incredibly favorable sentiment. Even in the worst case scenarios, they still celebrate marriage. Whereas with us, there is virtually no scenario where marriage is lauded, nor is it fulfilled at high rates. So I wonder why we are more pro-baby mamas and baby daddies than we are pro-marriage. Like, you'll find all the good of that lifestyle, even though it's not conducive, but somehow people still talk down on divorce. Well, if you had this type of perspective, would you talk down on divorce? And then also, structurally speaking, what is the benefit to this baby mama, baby daddy thing? What is the financial motive for this lifestyle? There's no financial benefit. You're just breeding for free, and you're breeding recklessly at that. Much as other demographics, they are pro-marriage. I love how they create counter-narratives, but still, somehow, in a roundabout sense, fulfill the reality that marriage is ideal. But when you take into consideration the failure rate that marriage creates, that does beg the question. They're telling their people, get married, you need to be married, and they'll give structural reasons. And they'll give, whether it's financial, legal, medical reasoning as to why you should get married. But they don't just stop there. Let's take a look at the ways they build a culture around marriage so that it's not just about getting married, but staying married and cultivating a healthy union within your marriages. What's beautiful is that they know the research on many different scales, so they know on a pro-marriage, on a multi-layered level, why marriage is beneficial. They don't just say, hey, do it. They give resources and tools to ensure that you will and that you should, and that further incentivizes marriage. Let's check this out. There are what is referred to as marriage projects. For example, the Marriage Project, whose mission states that it exists to educate a future generation while encouraging and inspiring. It aims to answer questions pertaining to marriage, and it has a monthly podcast advocating for family and marriage. And it provides testimonies from those who are married. It gives ways to contact questions. It gives reasons why people should be married. National Marriage Project from the University of Virginia, and its mission is stated that it is a nonpartisan, non-sectarian, and interdisciplinary initiative located at the University of Virginia. The project's mission is to provide research and analysis on the health of marriage in America, to analyze the social and cultural forces shaping contemporary marriage, and to identify strategies to increase marital quality and stability. It has 5 goals, including to publish what is referred to as the State of Our Unions, which monitors the current health of marriage and family life in America, to investigate and report on the state of marriage among young adults, to provide accurate information and analysis regarding marriage to journalists, policymakers, religious leaders, and the general public, especially young adults, conduct research on the ways in which children, race, class, immigration, ethnicity, religion, and poverty shape the quality and stability of contemporary marriage, and bring marriage and family experts together to develop strategies for strengthening marriage. The NMP conducts research, sponsors conferences, and public lectures at the University of Virginia. It publishes reports, books, and articles by family scholars and makes its findings available to the broader public through its website, media outreach, and publications. Supporting Healthy Marriage by MDRC. The project's overview is that the Supporting Healthy Marriage Project is the first large-scale multi-site, multi-year rigorous test of marriage education programs for low-income married couples, supported by the Administration for Children and Families within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The project is motivated by research that indicates that married adults and children raised by both parents in stable, low-conflict households do better on a host of outcomes. Supporting Healthy Marriage is part of a larger health and human service research agenda to study the effectiveness of efforts to strengthen family relationships. Other research projects include the Building Strong Families evaluation of programs, which is targeted to low-income unwed couples beginning around the time of their child's birth, and the Community Healthy Marriage Initiative evaluation. Couples retreats. As per the Sprite article, a designated time away for couples to refresh and reset their relationship, a time to be intentional about reconnecting with your spouse and to take advantage of uninterrupted time together. Couples retreats are provided by organizations or relationship experts where spouses can engage in activities as a group. This Bride's article goes on to provide what they refer to as the 11 best couples retreats around the world. Marriage conferences. A marriage conference, as per eaglefamily.org, is a place to discuss in-depth topics that strengthen and propel relationships. Marriage conferences help couples unify, whether a relationship is struggling or healthy. They help renew commitments, supply you with more tools, and help encourage self-reflection. According to the article, it says marriage conferences are the training ground for relationships, and during training, it helps to have a coach. At marriage conferences, you have access to an experienced life and relationship coach. They help couples get back on track. Conferences help you to refocus and renew attention to one another. The article goes on to provide a directory of marriage conferences by geographic location. articles written by All Pro Dad, and they have an entire subsection of marriage, but this one, for example, says 10 strategies to help solve your marriage problems. The Kentucky Counseling Center provides different articles, including this article that states common marriage problems and how to fix them. Very Well Mind has an entire section on self-improvement in relationships, in spouses and partners, and this would be found in that. 10 ways to strengthen a marriage and avoid divorce. Common marriage problems and solutions. There is an organization referred to as Focus on the Family, and it talks about marriage and parenting, and it has many different articles that are pro-marriage. It has a podcast. There's so much information on this particular website, and I know that it's specific to its belief system. And then there is what is referred to as the Marriage Channel. And I mean, I guess that speaks for itself. I showed all those resources because whether it's articles, conferences, retreats, lawyers, counselors, journalists, universities, books, studies, magazines, billboards, the list goes on. These just discussed in this video in and of itself. And I'm sure more that I have not discussed by far. It shows the structural advantage other collectives have because they put in the effort to create that structural advantage. It's like what I was talking about with the whole incentivism of families, how governments are working together with their populations that are experiencing birth rates that are declining and dying populations to ensure that they survive. They're all working together as a network to validate their sentience. And that's not something I can rail against because I know that it's them putting in the effort for themselves. That's self-love. It's one thing to say a person loves themselves, to structurally engineer the environment and ways of life around the sanctity of yourself. It verifies true unity, community, and it verifies that you value your life. Other collectives have no shortage of suitable mates to choose from because they are raised in a highly nuclear family-oriented / married family dynamic. Thus, it's enculturating them to understand marriage from that household level. So it's normal for them to perpetuate it. And it's not a small feat. I think of it as a miracle, if you will, as something even supernatural when you see massive amounts of people inclined towards the same positive action. Them taking the structural steps to benefit marriage, whether it's writing these different articles, publishing different reports and books and studies, whether it's doing their research regarding this phenomena, or even pushing people towards that, it's definitely to insist that they are not just self-loving in the hypothetical sense, but in the literal sense. I believe self-love is structural in how we attain through our choices a better outcome for our generations, collective, and offspring. I believe that other collectives are marriage-minded, community-minded, bloodline-minded, and collectivists. If there is anything that we can learn from in other collectives, it would be to structurally change the norms that are currently not benefiting us at all. We need to create more marriages, but we also, alongside of that, need to create solutions and sources so that these marriages can last and be healthy. We need to incentivize marriage in subliminal and overt ways alike. There's just so much opportunities within marriage that we may not have considered in terms of generational wealth, in terms of just the sanctity of the mind. And it would be nice if our collective, wherever we lived, was comprised of families. How much greater off would we be if there were so many families that anywhere you went, there was a household comprised of a family? That may seem like a dream for us, but for others, it is their overall reality. And I believe that they are benefiting in so many more ways than we can even begin to articulate because of that overall reality. We lack a sense of community, we lack wholesomeness, we lack togetherness, and this is very sickening to think about. The question is, how can we shift our modern narrative? We need to create structural advantages to uplift the marriage and family. That is all I have for this discussion. My name is Gershly Karen Pierre, and I'm pro-marriage, pro the nuclear family. Stay tuned for more.